Orks so you can play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and this is the very first story time of our new 40k narrative campaign, The Storms of Ixia. This campaign will be featuring Imperial Guard, Imperial Knights, Orks, and Tyranids. And I'll get into the story in just a moment. This is going to be a little different than our other campaigns in the sense that I'm going to try to put a lot more detail into the characters, into some backstories, into not necessarily like subplots where you don't know what's going on, but just trying to make the story even more rich. We've been experimenting with different things, and so that's what I want to try to do with this one. We're going to do that with a couple ways. One is to have a longer story time. So normally they were 5 or 6 minutes long, so I don't know how long this one's going to be, but it'll probably be longer than 5 or 6 minutes. And the second thing I'm going to do is release bonus story times every Tuesday. So this campaign comes out every Thursday for the next few weeks, and then every Tuesday we'll have some bonus story times available for free, where you get to learn more of the backstory of some of the characters, or the planet, or whatever it happens to be for that week. So hopefully this way you can get more into the characters and get more invested in the story as well. So what is this story? Well, it starts in the Immaterium with the frigate Ixia. The frigate Ixia is of course an Imperium frigate, which is currently carrying several Imperial Guard regiments. Now, these regiments are fresh from an Ork campaign victory. There was a big wog in the Jornifian sector, and for years they'd been fighting them, and they finally defeated this wog. Well, as much as you can defeat Orks, because there's always remnants here and there, but they've broken the backbone of the wog, and now really they're just all getting relegated to garrison duty on some other worlds, which to them will be kind of nice after the long war against the Orks. Now on this frigate is also a trio of Freeblade Knights, and these 3 Freeblades have been off doing whatever they've wanted for the past several decades. And just recently they were aboard the frigate Ixia when it was commandeered to move over and transport some of the remaining regiments. There's actually all sorts of different regiments from different companies and all of that of the Imperial Guard on board this frigate, as well as the tens of thousands of crew that piloted as well. While traveling through the Immaterium, they were hit by a very random, which is the only type there is, a very random warp storm, which not only damaged their ship, it also threw them off course. And they came out of the Immaterium in a system that they recognize as the Imaldu system. Now, the Imaldu system is an Imperium-held system, or at least was, but 1,000 years ago it was settled by the Imperium, but then was lost due to frequent warp storms. This happens. There are systems, there are entire sectors that are sometimes lost because there's so many warp storms happening there that they just can't travel through and get to those planets. And so nobody had been to this sector in quite a while. And the problem, though, is that at this point the frigate Ixia is horribly damaged. It had lost most of its power, most of its warp drives were offline, most of its weapons were offline. It's just basically this floating hulk that had some navigational capabilities. Some minor scans of the system identified the planet Ixia, which was the one that was inhabited by the Imperium at some point. And so they go and they establish an orbit there, which they just have enough power to do. Upon scanning the planet, they realize that it is no longer held by the Imperium, but is infested by both Orks and Tyranids. And so they look at it and they realize that there is Ork structures on part of it, and Tyranid structures on another part of it, which is kind of confusing because although their scanners aren't working really well, they don't detect anything in orbit. There's no ships, there's no Tyranid bioships or Ork huge ships or rocks or whatever it is. It's just clear. It's just them. So they don't know how the Orks and Tyranids got there. But upon further scanning, they do pick up 3 foundries that were basically relics from the Imperium that was there before. And they designate these foundry Primaris, Secundus, and Tertius. And we'll get into that in just a second. And when they look at these foundries, they realize that they might hold the necessary equipment in order that they could use to repair their ships, because they had serious damage on the frigate. It was not able to repair itself enough to get back into the warp, at least not with any substantial amount of time that would be before they run out of air and food and all those other things that kind of help to keep people alive. So due to this shortage of power, they decide to send some of the Imperial Guard regiments down to try to take these foundries so that they could find the parts. The issue, though, with their scanners doesn't allow them to identify good drop zones, because this world is actually a lush jungle world. There's a single continent, it's a very large continent, about the size of North America, and then the rest of the planet is just covered in ocean. On top of that, it's a very slow rotating world, and so it has very long nights and very long days as well. So Captain Wizen, who is one of the senior officers amongst the Imperial Guard regiments, is commissioned to go down and to bring a lot of Imperial Guard regiments that would serve as scout forces, just the light forces, so no heavy armor or anything like that, to try to find and establish a beachhead near Foundry Primaris. And so they go down, they clear out a minor group of orcs, and they start to establish their beachhead. And they even set up a communications array because the communications on the ship aren't even working very well, so they have to boost it with a communications array so that they can communicate back up to the ship, which is in orbit. Now, in the meantime, the Orks and the Tyranids become quite aware of the Imperium arriving. See, the Orks and Tyranids have been fighting for years, and we'll find out about their background more in another video. But they've been fighting for so long, and the problem is the Tyranids realized they were kind of losing this battle against the Orks. And so they've changed their tactics, they've adapted, they've hidden the majority of their forces, and are resorting to guerrilla-like warfare. So they're just popping out, doing some damage here to some vital supplies, or popping out, doing some damage to some trucks en route to take something somewhere. Whatever it happens to be, it's frustrating the Orks because they're no longer getting a good fight. At first it was like a dream come true when they were fighting these Tyranids because it was this constant battle against an enemy that just was unending, and they loved that. But after a while the Tyranids stopped doing that. They stopped fighting the honorable fight. Not that Orks care about honor, but they do care about a good fight. They stopped fighting a good fight and resorted to all this trickery, and it's just been bothering the Orks. So the Orks are getting antsy. There's a lot of infighting amongst the Orks, as there normally is. There's a lot of political divisions there, even though they kind of got united to fight against these Tyranids. So the Orks and Tyranids both see this frigate, the frigate Ixia, arriving as a way out. The Orks see it as a ship that they can use to finally get off this planet, or at the very least to commandeer the rather big guns that are on these frigates to bombard and finish off these Tyranids. Either way, they get to play with some new toys and go hunt for new war ground. The Tyranids see it as, hey, there's tens of thousands of life forms aboard that ship that will make tasty food and will bolster our ranks. So if the Tyranids can get the ship, if they can get on the ship, then they could really add to their ranks and maybe finally disrupt the stalemate that's happened between them. If the Orks get the ship, well, both cases it is bad news, but both the Orks and Tyranids now have their eye on that prize. So the leader of the Orks, who has managed to keep most of the Orks together in one large group, his name is Warboss Bug Squisha. And no, it's not a coincidence that his name is actually Bug Squisha, because he recently killed the previous Warboss, but he's been known for how much he's killed the Tyranids, and so he changed his previous name, which whatever it was, we don't know, to Warboss Bug Squisha, because he just enjoys a good fight with Tyranids so much. He's too far up in the north of the continent. The Imperial Guard landed on the southern part of the continent near Foundry Primaris. They were designated as Foundry Primaris, Secondus, and Tertius because the Primaris one seemed most likely to have the parts that they would need, and also seemed most accessible. Secondus is also an Orc territory, and Tertius appears to be in what looks like Tyranid territory. It's hard to totally divide it, but it looks like there's more Tyranid structures over there than Orc structures. But it's really hard because they don't have detailed scans of the planet, and it's been a long time since they've been there. And so Warboss Bug Squisha orders his troops to not assault the Imperial Guard beachhead because he wants to personally lead it, because he wants a good fight, and he just hasn't had one for a while. But his second in command, Warboss Gruffnod, who currently holds a position near Foundry Primaris, sees this as an opportunity. You see, he doesn't get along with Warboss Bug Squisha very much, and we'll go into the backstory of why not in a separate video. But just know right now, he'd rather depose Bug Squisha, which, you know, any good Orc war boss would want to do, so you can't really blame him. But he's not that cunning, so he hasn't really thought of an idea. However, his big mech advisor, Big Mech Grotchucka, has realized that this communications array that the Imperium have created would be the perfect way to hurt Bug Squisha. And he tells Gruffnod all about this. He tells him, if we go over there and we steal the communications array, don't destroy it, which Gruffnod's like, don't destroy the communications array, why not? He's like, no, if we capture it, then we can actually send false signals to the frigate and get them to drop the rest of their troops right on top of Bug Squisha. Because we'll signal back saying, here's a safe zone, and then they'll drop down all their heavy armor, and then Bug Squisha will be fighting them and most likely will be killed, and then you get to reign as the new war boss. So Gruffnod understood enough of this to realize it was a good plan, because, you know, he's brutal and a little cunning, whereas his big mech is cunning and a little bit brutal, as you know with Orcs. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. And so he decides to go and do this. But before he can go and do it, he realizes, the big mech realizes there's a flaw in the plan, and that when they're attacking, they can just vox back up to the frigate and tell them about the Ork attack. So the big mech decides to put together a device which he calls a disruption device, and disruption is spelled with an S-H-U-N at the end, of course. And this device, they're going to cart in the middle of one of these long nights, because these nights they go on for a very long time, so he's able to get it nice and close, and this will disrupt all the Voxcasters, it'll disrupt the communications array, so they won't be able to communicate back to the frigate. And of course the frigate won't realize something's wrong, it'll just say, oh, it must be some sort of storm, because of the frequent warp storms that are happening all around this planet. And so they manage to do this. They take a large force, and he abandons Foundry Primaris. He abandons it, and the Tyranids are nearby, and he just abandons it. He doesn't care about it anymore, even though it's full of wonderful guns and loot to play with. This is more important to him. So he shows you how much he hates Bug Squisha. And he goes down there in the midst of night with his huge horde of boys, and trucks, and battle wagons, and all sorts of stuff. And he even issues a bomber to come. And they set up the disruption device before the Imperial Guard realize what happens. And then a battle will ensue. That is Mission 1A, which is available for free at the link below. In the meantime, War Boss Bug Squisha is coming back with his huge elite force of Tyranid killers, ready to have a new fight against something that might actually put up a bit of resistance. And he realizes as he's coming by, because his path takes him close to Foundry Primaris, that Gruffnod has abandoned Foundry Primaris. What's worse is the Tyranids are starting to move into it. And he just can't have this. Now that there's actually a sizable Tyranid force that has actually showed its head, or showed its face, he realizes this is my chance to go squish some bugs. So the combination of not wanting to lose Foundry Primaris because of all the guns and stuff that's inside, and the chance to finally get to fight some Tyranids face to face, lures him away and distracts him. So War Boss Bug Squisha takes his large force and enters Foundry Primaris, and a battle ensues between him and the Tyranids. That is Mission 1B, also available below. Mission 1A is available for free. Mission 1B is available to Vault members only. If you're not a Vault member, you can still click on the link, and it'll take you to a free 7-day trial. And so you can, if you sign up for this trial, you get instant access to Mission 1B. So watch 1A first, then click on 1B, sign up for the Vault. If you're not a Vault member already, if you're a Vault member, just go and watch it, of course. And then you get to see what happens there. These are going to be epic games. They're both going to be 2,000 point games, so a really good start to the campaign. And we're going to see lots of Imperial Guard versus lots of Orks, and then lots of Orks versus lots of Tyranids. And they will determine what happens next in the narrative. I'm really going to use the missions and make sure that the result of that mission really will make a difference. If the Orks win and get the communications array, the Imperial Guard are going to be dropping on those Orks in places they don't want to. If the Imperial Guard win, then they're going to be able to establish their beachhead and get all their heavy stuff down there. And the Freeblades will be able to join them, because they need to have a good site to join. There won't be any Freeblades in these first two missions, because they just can't drop yet. There's just no way for them to get down there without really risking landing in a really bad spot, like in the middle of a huge jungle, or into a building, or into the midst of an Ork encampment. We just don't really know. So go ahead and watch those missions. They are at the links below. And leave your feedback, of course, on how much you like them, or what you'd like to see in the campaign. This is Matthew from MiniWarGaming. Thanks for watching, and happy wargaming.